Let's get started.
Moreover, Ahithophel said to Absalom,
Now, let me choose 12,000 men, and I will arise and pursue David tonight. I will come upon him while he is weary and weak, and make him afraid. And all the people who are with him will flee, and I will strike only the king. Then I will bring back all the people to you. When all return except the man whom you seek, all the people will be at peace.
and the saying pleased Absalom and all the elders of Israel. Then Absalom said,
Now call Hushai the Archite also, and let us hear what he says too.
And when Hushai came to Absalom, Absalom spoke to him.
Ahithophel has spoken in this manner. Shall we do as he says? If not, speak up.
The advice that Ahithophel has given is not good at this time. For you know your father and his men, that they are mighty men, and they are enraged in their minds like a bear robbed of her cubs in the field. And your father is a man of war.
And the other advice that we just read, that Ahithophel gave Absalom, was to go into David's concubine. So that's just getting David more and more upset when he hears about these things.
Bear robbed of her cubs in the field. And your father is a man of war, and will not camp with the people. Surely by now he is hidden in some pit or in some other place. And it will be, when some of them are overthrown at the first, that whoever hears it will say, There is a slaughter among the people who follow Absalom. And even he who is valiant, whose heart is like the heart of a lion, will melt completely. For all Israel knows that your father is a mighty man, and those who are with him are valiant men. Therefore, I advise that all Israel be fully gathered to you from...
And God's chosen king. So he should be scared just off that alone.
All Israel be fully gathered to you, from Dan to Beersheba, like the sand that is by the sea for multitude, and that you go to battle in person. So we will come upon him in some place where he may be found, and we will fall on him as the dew falls on the ground. And of him and all the men who are with him, there shall not be left so much as one. Moreover, if he is withdrawn into a city, then all Israel shall bring ropes to that city, and we will pull it into the river until there is not one small stone found there.
So Absalom and all the men of Israel said,
The advice of Hushai the Archite is better than the advice of Ahithophel.
For the Lord had purposed to defeat the good advice of Ahithophel, to the intent that the Lord might bring disaster on Absalom. Then Hushai said to Zadok and Abiathar,
What was the advice that Ahithophel gave him? The more recent advice? I will come upon him. Okay. Now let me choose 12,000 men, and I will arise and pursue David tonight. I will come upon him while he is weary and weak, and make him afraid. And all the people who are with him will flee. And I will strike only the king. Then I will bring back all the people to you. When all return except the man whom you seek, all the people will be at peace. Right? So let's go back a little bit more. The advice of Hushai, the advice of Ahithophel has given is not good. That's what Hushai is saying. You know your father and his men, that they are mighty men, and they are enraged in their minds, like a bear robbed of her cubs in the field. And your father is a man of war, and will not camp with the people. Surely by now he is hidden in some pit or in some other place, and it will be when some of them are overthrown at first that whoever hears it will say, There is a slaughter among the people who follow Absalom. and even he who is valiant, whose heart is like the heart of a lion, will melt completely. For all Israel knows that your father is a mighty man, and those who are with him are valiant men. Therefore I advise that all Israel be fully gathered to you from Dan to Beersheba, like the sand that is by the sea for multitude, and that you go to battle in person. So basically, Hushai is saying all-out war, gather everybody and go full-on force, a man versus man, David versus Absalom, army versus army, right? And Ahithophel seems like wanting to take a more strategic approach. Give me 12. He said 12,000 men. 12,000 men. He'll go there. Won't even, just try and kill David. Come back at night. I will come upon him while he is very weary and weak. Right, so a little more strategic. And I need to go back. And it says here, so Absalom and all the men of Israel said, the advice of Hushai the Archite is better than the advice of Ahithophel. For the Lord had purposed to defeat the good advice of Ahithophel to the intent that the Lord might bring disaster to Absalom. So it seems like God thought the Ahithophel's advice was good advice, versus Hushai's advice wasn't. But he wanted to bring disaster to Absalom. So, which is why everybody thought Hushai's advice was good, right? By thinking Hushai's advice is good and following Hushai's advice, you're following bad advice, right? So, for the Lord had purposed to defeat the good advice of Ahithophel to the intent that the Lord might bring disaster on Absalom, right? So God didn't want Absalom to succeed, which is why they did not follow Ahithophel's advice. Let's see what this Bible's got to say. This has a little bit more insight to what's going on. All right, here we go. Ahithophel realized that the fleeing king was in a vulnerable situation. He counseled Absalom to pursue and kill David and his followers in order to eliminate any chance that David would regain the throne. 12,000 men. The 12,000 men that he asked for would likely have been an easy time defeating the weary troops of David. I will strike only the king. Despite his celebrated wisdom, Ahithophel underestimated the loyalty of David's crack troops. Crack troops? What kind of commentary is that? Are you saying that David's troops are so crazy that they'd die for him? That they're so loyal? Or does crack troops mean something else? Ahithophel might have been able to defeat David in a surprise raid, but David's loyal warriors would not have scattered. I will bring back all the people. Ahithophel tried to persuade Absalom that if he killed only David, the people would align themselves with Absalom, and peace would be restored in the land. Although Absalom was pleased with Ahithophel's counsel, he did not accept it immediately. He summoned Hushai to get a second opinion on the matter. Hushai, David's confidant, set about to frustrate Ahithophel's wise counsel. Was Hushai the one that David sent in? Because I remember that there was somebody was like a double agent, right? Working for David. Was that Hushai? I'm reading in chapter 15 right now. Now it happened when David had come to the top of the mountain where he worshipped God. There was Hushai the Archite coming to meet him with his robe torn and dust on his head. David said to him, if you go on with me, then you will become a burden to me. But if you return to the city and say to Absalom, I will be your servant, O king, as I was your father's servant previously, so I will now also be your servant, then you may defeat the counsel of Ahithophel for me. Right? So David is using Hushai to defeat the counsel of Ahithophel from within. And the Lord has purposed this defeat, as we read here. All right, let's continue reading this commentary. We don't need to. We got what it's saying. So let's just continue because it's a decent amount more. But we got the understanding. Hushai is the double agent that David sent in to try and defeat Ahithophel's counsel from within. And the Lord God hath purposed it all from the ground up. So let's continue on from here.
Like the sand that is by the sea for multitude, until there is not one,
Hushai.
the king and all the people who are with him be swallowed up.
Now Jonathan and Ahimaaz stayed at En-rogel, for they dared not be seen coming into the city. So a female
whoa.
The river, much as one. Dew falls on the sea for multitude, and that you go to battle in person. There shall not be left ropes to that city.
So Absalom and all the men of Israel, for the Lord had purposed to defeat the good advice of
Okay,
Ahithophel,
that's good enough.
to the intent that the Lord might bring disaster on Absalom. Then Hushai said to Zadok and Abiathar the priests,
Thus and so Ahithophel advised Absalom and the elders of Israel, and thus and so I have advised. Now, therefore, send quickly and tell David, saying, Do not spend this night in the plains of the wilderness, but speedily cross over, lest the
There's that
king
double
and
agent.
all the people who are with him be swallowed up.
Now Jonathan and Ahimaaz stayed at En-rogel, for they dared not be seen coming into the city. So a female servant would come and tell them, and they would go and tell King David. Nevertheless, a lad saw them and told Absalom. But both of them went away quickly and came to a man's house in Bahurim, who had a well in his court, and they went down into it. Then the woman took and spread a covering over the well's mouth, and spread ground grain on it, and the thing was not known. And when Absalom's servants came to the woman at the house, they said,
Where are Ahimaaz and Jonathan?
They have gone over the water brook.
And when they had searched and could not find them, they returned to Jerusalem. Now it came to pass, after they had departed, that they came up out of the well and went and told King David.
Arise and cross over the water quickly, for thus has Ahithophel advised against you.
So David and all the people who were with him arose and crossed over the Jordan. By morning light, not one of them was left who had not gone over the Jordan. Now when Ahithophel saw that his advice was not followed, he saddled a donkey and arose.
Let me just pause this here real quick. What I'm doing is, I wanted to know. It says here, now Jonathan and Ahimaaz stayed at En-rogel, for they dared not be seen coming into the city. So a female servant would come and tell them, and they would go and tell King David. Nevertheless, a lad saw them and told Absalom. But both of them went away quickly and came to a man's house in Bahurim, who had a well in his court, and they went down into it. Then the woman took and spread a covering over the well's mouth, and spread ground grain on it, and the thing was not known. I'm trying to see what that meant. 17:18. Jonathan and Ahimaaz were the sons of Abiathar and Zadok, and Rogel was a spring or well south of Jerusalem at the junction of the Hinnom and Kidron valleys. A female servant, who is this? The young men would arouse suspicion by coming into the city, so a woman servant served as an intermediary. A lad saw them. The effort of Jonathan and Ahimaaz to avoid detection were unsuccessful. Bahurim was on the east side of the Mount of Olives. The word translated well may also refer to pit or cistern. Apparently there was no water in it at this time. But why put the grain on? Was that like, I was thinking like, was that like a signal, like a sign? This This commentary is not giving me any information on that either. Interesting. I wonder what that is.
Now when Ahithophel saw that his advice was not followed, he saddled a donkey and arose and went home to his house, to his city. Then he put his household in order and hanged himself and died. And he was buried in his father's tomb.
Oh, man.
Then David went to Mahanaim, and Absalom crossed over the Jordan, he and all the men of Israel with him. And Absalom made Amasa captain of the army instead of Joab. This Amasa was the son of a man whose name was Jithra, an Israelite, who had gone in to Abigail, the daughter of Nahash, sister of Zeruiah, Joab's mother. So Israel and Absalom encamped in the land of Gilead. Now it happened, when David had come to Mahanaim, that Shobai, the son of Nahash from Rabbah, of the people of Ammon, Machir, the son of Amiel from Lo-debar, and Barzillai, the Gileadite, from Rogelim, brought beds and basins, earthen vessels and wheat, barley and flour, parched grain and beans, lentils and parched seeds, honey and curds, sheep and cheese of the herd, for David and the people who were with him to eat. For they said,
"The people are hungry and weary and thirsty in the wilderness."
And David numbered the people who were with him, and set captains of thousands and captains of hundreds over them. Then David sent out 1/3 of the people under the hand of Joab, 1/3 under the hand of Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, and 1/3 under the hand of Ittai, the Gittite.
I also will surely go out with you myself.
But the people answered,
"You shall not go out. For if we flee away, they will not care about us, nor if half of us die will they care about us."
But you are worth 10,000 of us now, for you are now more help to us in the city.
Whatever seems best to you, I will do.
So the king stood beside the gate, and all the people went out by hundreds and by thousands. Now the king had commanded Joab, Abishai, and Ittai,
"Deal gently, for my sake, with the young man Absalom."
And all the people heard when the king gave all the captains orders concerning Absalom. So the people went out into the field of battle against Israel, and the battle was in the woods of Ephraim. The people of Israel were overthrown there before the servants of David. And a great slaughter of 20,000
Is that Hushai's
took
plan?
place there that day. For the battle there was scattered over the face of the whole countryside, and the woods devoured more people that day than the sword devoured. Then Absalom met the servants of David. Absalom rode on a mule. The mule went under the thick boughs of a great terebinth tree, and his head caught in the terebinth. So he was left hanging between heaven and earth, and the mule which was under him went on.
That's
Now
interesting. Both
man saw
Ahithophel
it and told
and
Joab.
Absalom died
I just
similar
saw
ways by
Absalom
hanging.
in a terebinth tree. You just saw him? And why did you not strike him there to the ground? I would have given you 10 shekels of silver and a belt. Though I were to receive 1,000 shekels of silver in my hand, I would not raise my hand against the king's son. For in our hearing, the king commanded you and Abishai and Ittai, saying, "Beware lest anyone touch the young man Absalom." Otherwise, I would have dealt falsely against my own life. For there is nothing hidden from the king, and you yourself would have set yourself against me. I cannot linger with you.
And he took 3 spears in his hand and thrust them through Absalom's heart while he was still alive in the midst of the terebinth tree. And 10 young men who bore Joab's armor surrounded Absalom and struck and killed him. So Joab blew the trumpet, and the people returned from pursuing Israel. But Joab held back the people.
I wonder what David's going to do to
They
Joab
took
now.
Absalom and cast him into a large pit in the woods and laid a very large heap of stones over him. Then all Israel fled, everyone to his tent. Now Absalom, in his lifetime, had taken and set up a pillar for himself, which is in the king's valley. For he said,
I have no son to keep my name in remembrance.
He called the pillar after his own name, and to this day it is called Absalom's monument. Then Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok, said,
Let me run now and take the news to the king, how the Lord has avenged him of his enemies.
And Joab said to him,
You shall not take the news this day, for you shall take the news another day. But today you shall take no news, because the king's son is dead.
Then Joab said to the Cushite,
Go, tell the king what you have seen.
So the Cushite bowed himself to Joab and ran. And Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok, said again to Joab,
But whatever happens, please let me also run after the Cushite.
Cushite means someone from the land of Cush, the remote region of what is today southern Egypt and Sudan. Okay, so they had other people fighting with them. Interesting.
Why will you run, my son, since you have no news ready?
But whatever happens, let me run.
Run.
Then Ahimaaz ran by way of the plain and outran the Cushite.
All right, he's
Now
fast.
David was sitting between the 2 gates. And the watchman went up to the roof over the gate, to the wall, lifted his eyes and looked. And there was a man running alone. Then the watchman cried out and told the king. And the king said,
If he is alone, there is news in his mouth.
And he came rapidly and drew near. Then
Oh,
the
shoot, but there's
watchman
2
saw
people.
another man running. And the watchman called to the gatekeeper and said,
There is another man running alone.
Oh, he's also bringing news.
He
Okay.
also brings news.
I think the running of the first is like the running of Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok.
He is a good man and comes with good news.
So Ahimaaz called out and said to the king,
All is well!
Then he bowed down with his face to the earth before the king.
Blessed be the Lord your God, who has delivered up the men who raised their hand against my lord the king.
Is the young man Absalom safe?
Nope.
When Joab sent the king's servant, and me, your servant, I saw a great tumult, but I did not know what it was about.
Turn aside and stand here.
So he turned aside and stood still. Just then the Cushite came.
There is good news, my lord the king. For the Lord has avenged you this day of all those who rose against you.
Is the young man Absalom safe?
May the enemies of my lord the king and all who rise against you to do harm be like that young man.
Then the king was deeply moved and went up to the chamber over the gate and wept. And as he went, he said thus,
Oh, my son, Absalom. My son. My son, Absalom. If only I had died in your place. Oh, Absalom. My son.
That's sad.
My son. Oh.
Like, even though Absalom was trying to kill him, it's still his son, you know?
And Joab was told,
Behold, the king is weeping and mourning for Absalom.
Who's going to tell
so
on
the
Joab? Someone's
victory
going to
that
tell.
day was turned into mourning for all the people. For the people heard it said that day,
The king is grieved for his son.
and the people stole back into the city that day, as people who are ashamed steal away when they flee in battle. But the king covered his face, and the king cried out with a loud voice,
Oh, my son Absalom! Oh, Absalom, my son! My son!
Then Joab came into the house to the king.
Today, you have disgraced all your servants, who today have saved your life, the lives of your sons and daughters, the lives of your wives, and the lives of your concubines.
Is he telling this to the
in
king?
that you love your enemies and hate your friends. For you have declared today that you regard neither princes nor servants. For today, I perceive that if Absalom had lived, and all of us had died today, that it would have pleased you well. Now, therefore, arise. Go out and speak comfort to your servants. For I swear by the Lord, if you do not go out, not one will stay with you this night. And that will be worse for you than all the evil that has befallen you from your youth until now.
Dang.
Then the king arose and sat in the gate. And they
So
told
he
all
has
the
some
people,
respect for Joab.
There is the king, sitting in the gate.
So all the people came before the king, for everyone of Israel had fled to his tent. Now, all the people were in a dispute throughout all the tribes of Israel.
The king saved us from the hand of our enemies. He delivered us from the hand of the Philistines. And now he has fled from the land because of Absalom.
But Absalom, whom we anointed over us, has died in battle. Now therefore, why do you say nothing about bringing back the king?
So King David sent to Zadok and Abiathar the priests.
Speak to the elders of Judah, saying, Why are you the last to bring the king back to his house, since the words of all Israel have come to the king, to his very house? You are my brethren. You are my bone and my flesh. Why, then, are you the last to bring back the king? And say to Amasa, Are you not my bone and my flesh? God, do so to me, and more also, if you are not commander of the army before me continually in place of Joab.
So he swayed the hearts of all the men of Judah, just as the heart of one man, so that they sent this word to the king.
Return, you and all your servants.
Then the king returned and came to the Jordan. And Judah came to Gilgal to go to meet the king, to escort the king across the Jordan. And Shimei, the son of Gera, a Benjamite, who was from Behurim, hurried and came down with the men of Judah to meet King David. There were 1,000 men of Benjamin with him, and Ziba, the servant of the house of Saul, and his 15 sons and his 20 servants with him. And they went over the Jordan before the king. Then a ferry boat went across to carry over the king's household, and to do what he thought good. Now Shimei, the son of Gera, fell down before the king when he had crossed the Jordan.
Do not let my lord impute iniquity to me, or remember what wrong your servant did on the day that my lord the king left Jerusalem, that the king should take it to heart. For I, your...
This is the guy that was cursing David, right? For being bloodthirsty. For, I think one of Saul's family, right? Taking over after Saul, Let me just double check. I think that is the guy. Yeah, that's the guy.
Your servant know that I have sinned. Therefore, here I am, the first to come today of all the house of Joseph to go down to meet my lord the king.
But Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, answered,
Shall not Shimei be put to death for this, because he cursed the Lord's anointed?
And David said,
What have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah, that you should be adversaries to me today?
David didn't do anything to Shimei at that time either, because he thought that it was punishment from God for, again, his sin with Uriah and Bathsheba.
Shall any man be put to death today in Israel? For do I not know that today I am king over Israel?
Therefore the king said to Shimei,
You shall not die.
And the king swore to him. Now Mephibosheth, the son of Saul, came down to meet the king. And he had not cared for his feet, nor trimmed his mustache, nor washed his clothes from the day the king departed, until the day he returned in peace. So it was, when he had come to Jerusalem to meet the king, that the king said to him,
Why did you not go with me, Mephibosheth?
My lord, O king, my servant deceived me. For your servant said, I will saddle a donkey for myself, that I may ride on it and go to the king, because your servant is lame. And he has slandered your servant to my lord the king.
Mephibosheth is the
But my
lame
lord the
son
king
of the
is
king.
like the angel of God. Therefore do what is good in your eyes. For all my father's house were but dead men before my lord the king. Yet you set your servant among those who eat at your own table. Therefore, what right have I still to cry out any more to the king?
Why do you speak any more of your matters? I have said you and Ziba divide the land.
Rather, let him take it all, inasmuch as my lord the king has come back in peace to his own house.
And Barzillai, the Gileadite, came down from Rogelim, and went across the Jordan with the king to escort him across the Jordan. Now Barzillai was a very aged man, 80 years old, and he had provided the king with supplies while he stayed.
Interesting. 80 is a very aged man now. Think back when they were living on 900 plus years. Now 80 is very aged. That's crazy. Look how like their lifespans dwindle down over time.
80 years old, and he had provided the king with supplies while he stayed at Mahanaim, for he was a very rich man. And the king said to Barzillai,
Come across with me, and I will provide for you while you are with me in Jerusalem.
How long have I to live, that I should go up with the king to Jerusalem? I am today 80 years old. Can I discern between the good and bad? Can your servant taste what I eat or what I drink? Can I hear any longer the voice of singing men and singing women? Why then should your servant be a further burden to my lord the king? Your servant will go a little way across the Jordan with the king, and why should the king repay me with such a reward? Please let your servant turn back again, that I may die in my own city near the grave of my father and mother. But here is your servant Kimham. Let him cross over with my lord the king, and do for him what seems good to you.
Kimham shall cross over with me, and I will do for him what seems good to you. Now whatever you request of me, I will do for you.
Then all the people went over the Jordan. And when the king had crossed over, the king kissed Barzillai and blessed him, and he returned to his own place. Now the king went on to Gilgal, and Kimham went on with him. And all the people of Judah escorted the king, and also half the people of Israel. Just then, all the men of Israel came to the king.
Why have our brethren, the men of Judah, stolen you away and brought the king, his household, and all David's men with him across the Jordan?
So all the men of Judah answered the men of Israel.
Because the king is a close relative of ours. Why then are you angry over this matter? Have we ever eaten at the king's expense? Or has he given us any gift?
And the men of Israel answered the men of Judah.
We have 10 shares in the king. Therefore, we also have more right to David than you. Why then do you despise us? Were we not the first to advise bringing back our king?
Yet the words of the men of Judah were fiercer than the words of the men of Israel.
That was 19, right? That's it for today. I just wanted to read this. The people of Israel were claiming a greater share in David's kingship since Israel's northern territory was formed by 10 tribes. This bitterness between the tribes of Israel and the tribe of Judah would lead finally to the division of the nation at the time of the death of Solomon. Oh, okay, so the looks like the tribe of Judah in the time of Solomon is going to secede from the rest of Israel. In the present situation, it threatened to erupt into civil war, which would take place under the leadership of Sheba. Sheba was from Benjamin, the same tribe as Saul. Okay. Okay. Well, that's going to be it for today. We just finished chapter 17, 18, and 19. Tomorrow we'll jump into chapter 20, the rebellion of Sheba. That's just what we were talking about right now. So we're going to get into that. Oh, we're going to get into some really interesting things. The Philistine giants destroyed. So more giants than just Goliath. I'm curious to see who they are and what bloodlines they can be tied back to, because we were talking about that earlier, right? That'll be really interesting. So let's check back with that for tomorrow, chapter 20, 21, and all that. We just finished chapter 17, 18, 19. Hope you guys enjoyed today's reading. It was pretty involved, right? There was a lot of stuff I had to go back and reread, and there's a lot of stuff happened. A lot of people's names. So we had to keep track of all the names and everything. So, but it was interesting. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. And I'll see you guys tomorrow for chapter 20, all right? Hope you guys have a nice day. Take care. Bye-bye.